Alright, let's say something to get me assassinated here. You might have noticed something drastic has changed. Many are waking up and seeing very clearly something like, well, this.
How much influence does Israel have on our country?
Israel's controlling our government.
Israel controls us.
Israel is in control of our government.
The government of Israel controls the United States.
Israel has run American foreign policy for 30 years.
It feels like we're just owned by Israel. We just never knew it.
Is the United States government now just taking edicts and orders from Israel?
Israel first.
Israel first.
Israel first.
This really is an Israel first administration.
Now, if you don't see that yet, I apologize for being so anti-Semitic. But back to reality for the adults in the room. Once people have woken up to what you just saw, many of them have been realizing this.
I do have a lot of uncomfort about America's relationship with Israel, the Israeli political leaders. That's what I mean. I believe that group it just feels like a satanic regime. It feels like they just want to cause pain.
Yeah. Most of Trump's now former supporters feel betrayed by him and have withdrawn their support. Hell, even the director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, has just resigned because, as he says, I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Yikes! Just to be specific, the drastic change in Trump has him making enemies out of his supporters, outcasting true America First patriots, while he endorses politicians and influencers that nobody in his former base likes or trusts, as he escalates a massive war on behalf of Israel that he promised he would never start.
It seems so insane based on what he ran on. I mean, this is why a lot of people feel betrayed, right? He ran on no more wars and these stupid, senseless wars, and then we have one that we can't even really clearly define why we did it.
So in tonight's special Come to Jesus episode, we'll learn exactly what the hell is happening so you can make sense of the senseless.
Revolutionary Volume 2. It's on now, motherfucker. Lock and load. This is the point of no return. I can never go back. Life without parole, upstate, shackled and trapped. Living in the hole, looking at the world through a crack. But fuck that, I'd rather shoot it out and get clapped. I've gone too far, there ain't no coming back for me. Auschwitz gas chamber full of Zyklon B. Just like the Spanish exterminating Tainos, raping the black and Indian women, creating Latinos. Motherfuckers made me out of self-righteous hatred, and now you got yourself a virus stuck in the matrix. A suicide bomber strapped and ready to blow. Lethal injection strapped down, ready to go.
And Trump said he had these negotiations. Oh, we're actually just getting the first photo of those negotiations. Yep, breaking. First photos of Trump's call with Iran. The guy's insane. If you follow his Twitter, he'll say one thing and 5 minutes later say the exact opposite thing. And this just happens over and over. This has been happening for a long time. It's like a psychopathic, deranged, schizophrenic is basically doing all these things. And he then even said, right after he said they're in negotiations with which Iran said, no, they're not. Like, what kind of negotiations is one side like denying they even happened? Doesn't even really make sense. And they're very emphatic about it that they're not going to, because every time they negotiate with the U.S. or Israel, they completely just backstab them. And, you know, like, they were actually in negotiations when they did the first attack. And they killed everyone they were negotiating with, by the way. So what group of people is going to have another negotiation after that? But then he said that now the Strait of Hormuz is going to be controlled by him and the Ayatollah. So both of them. And then he goes, whoever the Ayatollah is, like, he doesn't even know.
And who's in control of it? Will Iran still be able to control the flow of oil?
Be jointly controlled.
By who?
Maybe me. Maybe me.
You want the United States to be in
Me
control?
and the Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is, whoever the next Ayatollah. Look.
Okay, so the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and Trump says, I'm in control of it now, along with the person that we just attacked and killed, actually, the first Ayatollah, Khomeini. And whoever the new one is, he doesn't even seem to know. He's like, oh, we'll both be in charge of it. Like, what? Can someone just slap him? Just like say something that actually is true or logical or make any sense, because none of it makes any sense. Actually put this out right after. The Strait of Hormuz will be controlled by me and the Ayatollah. They show a car with a steering wheel and a kid's steering wheel. That's actually pretty funny. I'm actually loving the Iranian side so much. They're like, yeah, we're trying to kill the Epstein satanic pedophores. It's like, good. Now, I don't know. See, who knows what's actually really going on? Who knows? But, you know, if I had to pick one side, it's the easiest thing ever to do. If you assume that both sides are like actually different sides, which is possible. It's possible. And then you had to pick one. Like who? Like you'd have to be so evil or so stupid. But basically evil if you're cheering for the U.S. side and the Israel side, because they're like super evil. Not everyone in the U.S., not everyone in Israel. The governments.
The betrayal of America first. Let's start here with, well, what you could call treason.
There are a bunch of people in the U.S. government who do not put the United States before the interests of Israel, period. And you saw that very clearly with Mike Huckabee. We interviewed him last week, and there was no sense at all that he represents the United States or has any interest in what happens to the United States.
As Trump campaigned on America first, and now his support base has very much imploded, as his actions are very much Israel first, we see he's not the only one in the U.S. government that serves the Israel flag. And, probably just because it's good for business, Trump has also viciously turned on anyone that doesn't toe the Israel first line. And Trump is the bravest president ever, according to Ben.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. The president right here is doing the bravest thing that I've ever seen an American president do when it comes to foreign policy.
So what changed? Trump broke promises on the Epstein files to protect predators, promised no new wars, and now bows down to Israel and has America fighting a war on their behalf.
Dude, this is going to be a bit of a full-on conspiracy rant, but I don't think there's any avoiding it at this stage. It's, dude, there's so much stuff going on. It's like you just have to force yourself to stop, and I'm just going to talk about what I'm going to talk about, and you know, things are developing by the hour, and yeah, it's crazy. Everybody knows.
You have to understand the idea, we must defend Israel. We're God's chosen people, so God wants us to. Well, not so fast. Spoiler alert, in the US we have separation of church and state, which prohibits the government from endorsing a religion, even if that religion is funding many people in government. Not to mention that going to war for religious reasons on behalf of another country to the detriment of our own, well, qualifies as treason. So there's that too. But more importantly, the very idea of Israel is God's chosen people, it's highly questionable and most likely just not true for two reasons. Number one, the people in the state of Israel are not God's chosen people according to Christianity and the Bible, because traditional interpretations viewed Israel in the Bible to mean church, not people living in the literal state of Israel, which didn't exist until the late 1940s, thanks in part to the Rothschilds family. So the interpretation was people who go to church are God's chosen people. And that kind of makes sense. It wasn't until Zionist interpretations came along in the 1890s where they brought a new, suspiciously different interpretation. And the spread of Zionism was heavily supported by the Rothschilds family. They're great. Now, the second reason that people living in the literal state of Israel are God's chosen people doesn't pass a sniff test is, well, does genocide, burning children alive, and prisoner rape seem like something God's chosen people would do? Here's a former U.S. intel officer.
For 1 year, I have watched Israel burn children alive.
And 5 Israeli soldiers were caught sexually assaulting a male Palestinian prisoner. Is that something God's chosen people would actually do? Also, God is against sodomy. They did that. By the way, if you're sitting there going like, This isn't a look at citizens of Israel. This is a look at the Israeli government.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Netanyahu, the deep fakes, these trollish proof of life videos that are blatantly AI, and we got to talk about Joe Kent and his earth-shattering resignation from the counterterrorism department, or whatever his job title was. The Joe Kent phenomenon, and I watched his whole interview on Tucker, which was kind of interesting. And Professor Zhang, and yeah, we got to talk about all these guys, and I'm basically back to the point where, more than ever, I'm convinced that all these guys, they're spooks. This is all part of the new, this new alternative media. This is the new Mockingbird media, and it only became so much more apparent this week, and we'll get into that.
Now, you can believe that's all things God's chosen people would do, because people in the Epstein files who are still in positions of power in our government tell you that's what God's chosen people would do. Or you can apply common sense and maybe even consider how we might currently be in the fiercest psyop the world has ever known. This just in! Here's how to tell when you're in a psyop. According to behavioral expert Chase Hughes, there's 3 characteristics to look for to tell if you're in a psyop. And you have to spot the characteristics because they never tell you, this is a psyop. Obviously, because then it wouldn't work. The 3 characteristics that tell you when you are in a psyop are, number 1, there's a silencing mechanism. Number 2, there's a strong narrative. And number 3, they create tribalism. Let's break it down, because this is fun. Number 1, the silencing mechanism is a means to silence opposing ideas, aka the truth. Truth needs to be censored because psyops are never on the side of truth. Because truth doesn't need a psyop. Truth is self-evident and therefore is strong enough to stand on its own 2 legs. So for example, a silencing mechanism could look like abolishing the First Amendment rights of Americans to silence anti-Israel sentiment. Like that.
20 years imprisonment for Americans participating in boycotts of Israel.
It can also look like silencing through intimidation. So that's also what the Twitter of one of God's chosen people happens to look like, apparently. Number 2, the strong narrative component of a psyop. That phrase is repeated obnoxiously often, usually in defiance to reality and your common sense. An example of how that can sound is maybe like, Israel is our greatest ally. How? We're not taking questions right now. Number 3, the tribalism component of a psyop. This is beautiful, because this is meant to threaten your deep human need to have a sense of belonging. If you don't straighten up and fall in line, you're out of the tribe. An example of how that can look is, well, this. Those who speak ill of Mark will quickly fall by the wayside. They are not MAGA. So, even though all the components of a psyop to perpetuate Israel's interests are present, assembled, and active here in America, I don't know if we're in a psyop. I mean, it's just really hard to tell. Now let's bring it home with this question. Does Israel control the U.S.? Answer, no. It appears Zionism controls the U.S., and Zionism controls Israel. The demonic heart of Zionism seems to reside more in Israel, so on the surface, it very much looks like Israel controls the U.S. And that can explain why Trump has drastically changed and his support is vanished. But Israel and the U.S. are just symptoms of a common thread, the political ideology of Zionism. A virus that's infiltrated and probably helped create the government of Israel, and now the U.S. government is largely occupied by the same virus. For the record, that virus wasn't created in a lab. It was created in someplace worse. In conclusion, as you know, something has clearly happened. Something has clearly changed. And it probably wasn't you. It was the people that you supported and what controls and influences them. That's what's changed. Once upon a time, it seemed as though what controlled Trump was the will of we the people. He now seems to be acting in service to something very different. And when things get crazy, even satanic, you're told that you're the problem if you speak up. Don't fall for it. You're not the problem because you didn't change. If you see the dramatic change, the time to speak up is now.
And I believe that if we don't speak up now, that our children won't have the chance to speak up.
Have a good night, and I appreciate you watching. Jason, give me my bulletproof vest. I'm going for a walk.
These Netanyahu videos, man, I'm assuming everyone has at least heard of these if you haven't seen them all. Because there was like the 5 different shorts that came out that were all blatantly AI. At least the first several were like, it was so in your face with the extra fingers, and then they're mocking, oh, I have 5 fingers underneath. The one with Huckabee was really cringe, where they're talking about his kill list, and Huckabee's like, I'm glad I'm not on the list.
I'm alive, but I have this card. Oh. And, yeah, don't read it. So it's a punch card. Mm-hmm. Today I erased 2 names on the punch cards, and you see how many more to go on this batch.
You know what the good news is? My name is not on the punch card.
Your name is on the list of the good guys.
Thank you.
And what the president, the U.S. forces are doing is incredible. We're very proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And getting rid of these lunatics who would like to develop nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to every American city after wiping out Israel. They ain't going to do that. We're wiping them out.
I love it. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Take care.
It's like, what is this? And then he does the longer press conference where everyone's like, oh, okay, I guess he's still alive. Which I don't know if that's convincing to me or not. I mean, I'm still... Yeah, I could go either way in terms of him being... Because some people have speculated that he died around March 8th. And apparently his son was a big Twitter addict and tweeting like 40 times a day. And then from March 8th, he was like totally silent for a week, which would be the time where you're sitting Shiva and in mourning. So yeah, people are still speculating whether he was killed in that attack on his residence or whatever it was. And this press conference that was like 30 minutes... It was still a virtual press conference, so it's not unthinkable that this could be AI as well. Or somebody was mentioning to me that this could just be somebody wearing a mask. You know, the CIA lifelike mask technology, and then you just dub in a voice or whatever. You know, he could be dead, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, either way, whether he's alive or dead, the trolling is real. The trolling is no doubt that some of these videos that were put out by his X account were fake, they were AI, and like the Huckabee one, Huckabee validated it, saying that he was there, he should know, he you know. So if nothing else, it's some kind of a honeypot and some kind of a gaslighting operation here. And it was crazy because it made me think about videos I made, and I had to go back in the go back to 2019 where I made this video called A Hall of Black Mirrors.
And perhaps you can see where this is going. A deep fake of a politician announcing a ban, a strike, war. A deep fake of a news anchor explaining events that never actually happened. People begin to question if what they're seeing is true. And how can a democracy function if people cannot tell the difference between real and fake information? Furthermore, people begin to question real information, which perhaps could be falsified. You can see where this story is going. Deepfake propaganda leads to weaponized deepfakes. We begin to question everything. We fall into this existential crisis, lamenting the ends of reality. Everything is fake, nothing is real anymore.
Where I was speculating about pretty much this exact type of thing. You know, we didn't really have generative AI yet. We just had this is when they were first talking about deepfake technology and facial swapping technology and all this stuff that now is like so commonplace. But it's been interesting because so many people have been focused on the obvious fakery going on with Netanyahu, and of course that serves to point people further towards the conclusion that, you know, Israel is just unhinged and crazy and out of the U.S. control, which, of course, was further validated by Joe Kent. in his resignation letter, and that's why it's getting so much attention, is because it's like he's validating all the things that people like Tucker and Candace and, increasing number of people in the alternative media and, the great noticing phenomenon that has been going on. Finally, you had somebody from the administration, who was an insider, who was testifying and validating this, this idea that, Israel is the one calling the shots, and whether that's because of blackmail or just because of people captured by Zionist ideology or all of the above, that's what Joe's resignation was all about. And of course, now he's being attacked by the Zionist mainstream. And this only seems to further validate his position. So yeah, I had no idea. I had never paid attention to Joe Kent prior to this week.
So let's hope that tonight, with this conversation with Joe Kent, is the beginning of the long overdue truth-telling, which is the only thing that will save this country. And one final note about Joe Kent, who I spent the last 24 hours with. Joe Kent's resume hardly needs explanation because everyone is aware this is a man who deployed on 11 combat missions to the global war on terror. This is sort of the perfect representation of the GWAT generation. This is one of those guys we often celebrate but too rarely hear from, who we sent out to fight the so-called war on terror that began on 9/11. And it's an entire generation of men who look and sound, for the most part, very much like Joe Kent. So the implication, of course, he doesn't care about security or he's soft on Iran. Joe Kent spent, the majority of his 20s and 30s fighting Iranian proxies and watching his friends get killed by them. So this is someone who's actually earned the right to speak about Iran and the war on terror. And of course, he was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. So he's thought a lot about terrorism in this country and the blowback from events like this. And we're going to ask him about that as well. But the other thing to notice about Joe Kent, and it may be his defining factor, is that he doesn't slander anyone. His resignation letter was not an attack on Donald Trump. It wasn't a promise to write a tell-all memoir about what he saw on the inside or to aggrandize himself or to get a job on a TV show or sell something. I asked him at dinner last night, what are your plans? None. He did this purely because he believes, as he'll explain in a second, this is the only way to save the United States from certain disaster. Tell the truth.
But before it even got underway, I was like, it's just a little too perfect. It's a little bit too exact. It's like this, he was just tailor-made for this moment, And then you start to look into their background, and lo and behold, I mentioned the 11 deployments. And then he retired from the military in 2018, but then joined, it's right there on his Wikipedia, that he became a paramilitary officer for the CIA. So basically we're talking about two CIA guys sitting down, having a conversation, and what I would see now is just doing exposition for, the normie audience, or the quasi alternative media audience that Tucker has now he really is kind of the kingmaker, I see him now, of this new coalition, this new post-MAGA, the fact that Israel called him the greatest anti-Semite in the world and everything. It's like, this is all by design. This is all part of what I think is the new dialectic. We'll get into that in a minute, but...
Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Right, so it's like... At this point, anytime there's like a book, it's like I'm getting J.D. Vance vibes. It's just, I don't know, this might upset people. I don't really care at this point. Because I'm sort of always on the lookout for what are the less obvious psyops. What are the less obvious, the obvious propaganda everybody's meant to see, everybody's meant to react to. But, Joe Kent is being contrasted against Tulsi Gabbard, who her whole political career was all about, ending these forever wars and the regime change wars and all the post 9/11 hangover that our whole generation has been experiencing for so long. Tulsi Gabbard was supposed to be the person standing up to this and opposing the Iran war, and everyone believed that that's what Trump was going to be, right? So that's why there's so much emotional investment and wanting to believe Tucker and wanting to believe a guy like Joe Kent and believe, but it's like, okay, I guess I'm just super cynical, super jaded at this point, but I don't think so. And I think this week is very interesting because I think we're starting to really see a lot of the pieces come together in terms of this new dialectic, and Tucker being at the center of it. But yet the whole conversation that Joe Kent and Tucker had was covering, they didn't just talk about Iran and the fact that there was no imminent threat. That was kind of the bombshell point with his whole resignation, that, like, you know, from his position, having access to classified intel, he's coming out and saying there was no imminent threat by Iran, and so we started this conflict. We are the aggressors. It's kind of what everybody else, you know, saying the quiet part out loud, what everyone else already knows, that, like, this is bogus. So it's being validated by Joe Kent. So understandably, it's a big deal. But then the conversation really kind of expanded into a whole lot of things, and it was just connecting all the dots in terms of the Charlie Kirk assassination fiasco and basically pointing the finger at Israel there. So that's getting a lot of attention. Also tying in the 2 alleged assassination attempts on Trump as being somehow connected to Iran or Israel, you know, blaming Iran, and so controlling Trump that way. And you guys already know what I think about specifically the Butler, PA assassination. And it was all fake. So yeah, it's like you see how all this stuff from the past year, now that here we are with the Strait of Hormuz insanity, and they're putting the squeeze on the whole global economy, all this stuff was build up for it. You can see how it all is fitting together, and how now, you know, you have guys like Joe Kent, who was just kind of in the background, you know, playing a very pivotal role. And so, yeah, the whole time I was watching this, it was just so much confirmation that, like, this is what we are supposed to conclude. They want people to turn on Zionism. They want people to blame the Zionists for essentially tanking the world economy. And we can talk about what the reasons for that may be. That's still up for debate, I say. But the fact that they want, and that started with October 7th, I would say, and all the carnage in Gaza, it was all done intentionally, or at least knowingly, knowing that there was going to be backlash, and then you just turn that backlash into more quote-unquote proof of anti-Semitism, and it just becomes the self-fulfilling, the self-fueling, you know, eschatological spiraling thing. Where it's like, you know, how do you get the whole world to come and attack Israel? Well, you you do more and more unhinged things. But really, this is all by the design of the globalist. In the same way that, like, the right-left paradigm it's a dialectic, it's a false dualism that has been used in America for decades, right? This is just another version of that, to where, so I'm not, obviously, if you guys have been following my channel, you know I'm not defending Zionism or Israel. But it's in the same way that, like, pointing to the lefties and trying to own the libs and seeing that, like, all the evil in the world is being simply coming from, you know, leftism. That's dialectical thinking. That's keeping you in the right-left paradigm, and you can only ever see half the picture, and you're blind to whatever they want to. I mean, this is going on right now, right? With everything that they attach to Trump in terms of the PayPal mafia and the technocracy and the crypto scam with stablecoin. Like, most people on the right are completely oblivious to all of this stuff, Palantir, everything. And so it's that false it's the dialectic at work. And so ultimately, I don't think they care if you're anti-Zionism or pro-Zionism, whether you're blaming the Israelis and Trump and the Christian Zionists in America, or you're blaming the Muslim terrorists. I don't think they care, as long as you don't see that this is all by design in order to crash the world economy on purpose and create, you know, chaos and devastation that way, or at least the very real and serious threat. Like, how close we're going to go to the edge or over the edge remains to be seen. But the threat is real. I mean, like, closing the Strait of Hormuz and, you know, playing with the price of oil and all the ripple effects. Yeah, this really is the chokehold. This really is the gun to the head of, you know, the public around the world. The rise of Professor Zhang, I've talked about him a couple times before. You know, he was virtually unknown a few months ago. Like 6 months ago, definitely nobody knew who he was. So he just exploded almost overnight. And so this week I finally stopped and kind of tried to dig into his background a little bit more. And that is super bizarre. Speaking of spooks, they're all spooks. But he's called Professor Zhang, but he's actually not a college professor. He's a high school teacher, an English teacher. who does these classes talking about, world geopolitics and religion and end time stuff. I mean, he's a total Gnostic spiritually. So you got Joe Kent, who's part of that whole like ecumenical kind of push to, encourage people to go back to the Roman Catholic Church because we're painting evangelicalism and Protestantism as just being totally corrupted by Zionism. And then Zhang is kind of a similar vein in terms of like, he doesn't even believe in the Bible at all, but he has lots of opinions about it, and they're Gnostic. But he talks about the Illuminati and all the conspiracy stuff, and he's blown up. But it gets really weird when you stop and you look into his background, and, his family moved from China to Toronto, Canada, when he was age 6. And then, so he grew up in Canada and then was educated at Yale. He got a scholarship to go to Yale, which is a major spook central. That's where Skull and Bones is. And then as an undergrad, he went back to China, I think, to teach. And it gets really weird because somehow he's written articles for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, a bunch of other publications, even though he's never been more than a high school teacher. And in 2001, he was working with PBS to do some filming for documentary in China about the economy, and so he was arrested by the Chinese government and deported back to Canada, and then a year later allowed to come back to China, which is like, how often does that happen? That's where it starts getting like real spooky. And then at some point, like the dates aren't even clear to when all this happened, but at some point he was working for this global innovation education initiative through Harvard, some department of Harvard. And when you look into this global innovation education initiative, one of the things that jumps out, a lot of it's just lofty jargon that doesn't tell you much, but when you look at this section on global citizenship, it's like, okay, yeah, this is it's like a global education think tank, research outfit, whatever, he's a globalist. So this idea, I've seen videos where people are saying, he's working for because he's in China now. So I understand why people think that he'd be part of the CCP, but I'm like, no, dude, this, and if you're able to kind of wrap your head around the idea that maybe China is actually a lot more controlled by Western intelligence agencies, or at least in cooperation, than a lot of people think. Yeah, he's not a Chinese spy, but you have to stop and ponder how weird it is that this guy, who's a Yale graduate, worked at this Harvard globalist educational thing, is now living in Beijing teaching at this moonshot school. But he's teaching in English, and he's posting his lessons onto his YouTube channel. And oh yeah, by the way, isn't YouTube banned by the Chinese government? How is this guy even on YouTube? How does this guy have the freedom to be talking about world politics and talking to Tucker Carlson? I mean, yeah, so he's... This guy glows like nobody's business. And so Tucker spent 20 minutes introducing Joe Kent and like what a great guy he was and elaborating upon his whole resume and everything like that. But with Professor Zhang, he's like, I don't know who this guy is. All I know is I've watched a few videos and he has a lot to say and he's made all these predictions. So here we go. Let's give him an interview. So the part that I wanted to play here is a clip that blew me away. Is that Zhang is explaining how because of the implosion of the world economy due to the Iran-Israel war, that the United States is going to need to absorb Canada and Mexico, along with Greenland and Venezuela and Cuba, and effectively creating the North American Union. And Tucker Mockingbird Carlson is in total agreement.
So, from a geopolitical perspective, if America is forced to retreat back into the Western Hemisphere, it needs to worry about resources. And so it is in the best interest of America to eventually take over and colonize both Canada and Mexico.
Yes.
Mexico for its labor supply, Canada for its resources. That's Canada's probably the wealthiest country in the world.
I know.
And so from a geopolitical perspective, if the world is retreating into self-sufficiency, if there's mercantilism, if there's trade barriers, then America has absolutely no choice but to ensure its own supply networks. And that means eventually taking over Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Latin America, Cuba, Venezuela. So America doesn't really have much choice in this matter. At the same time, what we're seeing is that this war, as well as other events, are causing political fissures in America, especially between left and right. So witness what happened in Minneapolis in January, right? And so we can expect that as this war continues, and there's a strong possibility that Donald Trump will call up a national draft in order to ensure the manpower to fight this war, then you will have rioting in the streets, you have massive violence, in which case the National Guard is deployed. There's a plan to deploy the National Guard to all major American cities by April. And so, unfortunately, America is probably going to suffer a long, many years of sectarian violence. Not a full-fledged civil war, but maybe something along the lines of the Troubles in Ireland. I'm not sure if you've seen this terrible movie called One Battle After Another. It's just a terrible movie, by the way, but it gives you insight into what a civil war might look like, where you have these insurgent groups fighting against the state. So yeah.
So I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that clip, because it's like, yeah, how crazy is this? That here's these two guys, all three of these guys, right, who are all, these guys are all basically exposing the Zionist element of the American-Israeli war machine. The Trump administration has labeled Tucker as it's like one of its number one enemies, and yet here Tucker is basically advocating the same idea that Trump and Rubio and Hegseth and all these guys have been kind of seeding into the public consciousness for the past year, talking about buying Greenland and joking about absorbing Canada. And of course, everybody knows about Venezuela, and then now Cuba's next. They're basically starving Cuba right now. So it's a crazy time, but here's Professor Zhang and Tucker advocating for the same North American Union, the same technate, in the name of a mercantile, self-preservation kind of reaction to this worldwide economic chaos. And so, as I've been thinking about that, I'm like, okay, that's as crazy as it sounds. It totally just makes sense as to what they're really doing with all this. And how this is really, this is the COVID 2.0 plan, where instead of, stay home, save lives, it's stay home, save fuel, stay home, save gas. And you can start to put the squeeze on. I mean, it's already happening. We've already, I think, peaked at $118 a barrel, is the list I saw. And so whether it goes all the way up to 200 and you just devastate economies and people start actually starving, or just the very real tangible threat, I mean, people will freak out. It doesn't take that many days of empty shelves and panic buying and all that stuff to where you have the public in a very, in a very malleable state, absorbing everyone into basically an American version of the EU. That's what the North American Union is basically. I mean, and they've been talking about this for so long. It's crazy that we're actually watching Mr. Carlson actually talking about the same thing that, the Technocracy Inc. people were proposing almost 100 years ago. And then, the Club of Rome and all this stuff, these different regional economic zones. But if it was a matter of like, hey, do you want to eat? Do you want to survive? Do you want to keep the lights on? Like, if it's presented as the only solution to, starving or freezing to death in the winter, or, mass... Yeah, I think people would start to be like, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Maybe it is time for sort of a third political party to arise that is neither Democrat nor Republican. And that would kind of make sense. And this is what I mean by sort of an emerging new dialectic, to get away from the Republican-Democrat dialectic. At some point, you got to think it's kind of going to people are catching on that it's the uniparty, right? As, Jimmy Dore loves saying, no matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain. People are so sick of voting for one side or the other and then them, totally bailing on their promises. Especially since 9/11, we've seen that happen so much more blatantly. And so if we're going to elevate that sort of political dialectic onto a more regional North America, you got to have to kind of create, maybe even worldwide, to where the new worldwide political dialectic is, do you support Israel or not? I mean, that's what Zionism wants to make sort of the ultimate, that's all they care about. Is, are you a quote-unquote anti-Semite or not, right? And so that just gives us a whole new thing to argue about, a whole new thing to get up in arms and be divided over with our friends and families, when in reality, they're building the one world system, and they don't care which side you're arguing for as long as you're doing it on your your mobile slave device and you're using their social media platforms and using AI to like collate your research and everything. Like it's win-win. They don't care. The whole point is like we're ushering in the new system. So the whole point of this outline and this rant here is, I'm not trying to spread fear, but simply acknowledge that this war in Iran and the subsequent economic hardship, or the threat of economic hardship, is designed to instill fear and anxiety and trauma as a leverage tool, right? Just like COVID was. People were afraid of getting sick and dying and afraid of killing grandma and afraid, they use fear to force people to lock themselves down. And so this will be slightly different in terms of like, economic pressure. And then, just coincidentally at the same time, we still had this TSA debacle going on in so many airports because of the partial government shutdown. Totally coincidental timing, right? So travel is already kind of a nightmare at the airports. And we're not even really into the crude has not really hit the fan yet. Ultimately, what Satan wants people to doubt is the reality of God. The reality that the Bible is true and that Jesus is exactly who he said he was and that he is coming back. And so it's all about creating doubt. You create this whole false Zionist, dispensationalist, Huckabee, straw man eschatology and just make a mockery of it on the world stage. And, basically make Bible-believing Protestant Christians in alignment with the new Nazi regime. I mean, it's crazy irony that Satan would flip the script in such a way and use the trauma of World War II, right? Both the reality and the psychological trauma that was been inflicted upon everybody just through propaganda, and create this new apartheid state in 1948, which indoctrinates its citizens into this ethno-supremacist ideology in the name of Abraham, in the name of Torah, in the name of God, and then use that to plunge the world into chaos and ultimately a new economic and political order. That's a pretty crazy conspiracy theory. But it seems like that's what's happening. That's all I don't know what else to tell you. That's what I see. It's what I see in scripture even, and in the world, and they align. But yeah, it is crazy ironic that our whole obsession with Hollywood movie magic that we all basically grew up with, right? That it would culminate in this current atmosphere of abject confusion and Orwellian obfuscation. Our mobile telescreens flashing more images and commentary than our limited human brains can even process at this point, or know what to believe. And it creates this state of learned helplessness in the digital moviescape.
But we have to start talking. We have to start standing up. We have to start expressing what it means to be that 30% of thinking people, so that those other 70% or half of them or the others that went along with it because they didn't think there was anyone else out there, they know we're there. And if you're in that 30% and you're being lazy, you're not supporting groups, if you are into the investigation of terrain theory, if you're not supporting Alex Zach or Ben Tapper or Katie Collins and the work that they're doing, then what benefit are you bringing? These people are putting their butts on the line. They're putting it out there. If you're in that 30% that is worried about AI and is worried about the authoritarian surveillance state, but you have a Ring camera on your door, I know you're there. I know you're watching right now. I know how convenient it is to be able to check in on your door, but you are putting the bars on our prison. And so many of you that are worried about AI, they're even telling me I'm writing using AI to figure out how inhuman it's going to be. I'm using my ChatGPT or checking my science against AI. And I'm really worried about AI, but AI is telling me I'm on the right path. I get it. There's an advantage to using AI right now. There's an advantage to getting a leg up on the other business until they start using it too, and eventually this pyramid will all come collapsing down. But where will we be? Who will we blame? AI can't be stopped. It certainly cannot be stopped if you're using it today. And the surveillance state certainly cannot be stopped if you're installing the cameras today. I'm not going to sit here and have some litmus test for purism or quality. I don't have Alexa in my house. There's no Ring camera on my door. And so far, to date, call me stupid, I don't know how to use ChatGPT.
If you take away the Soviet Union and its chief proxy, the PLO, international terrorism would collapse.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. Third nation, by the way, is Libya. Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would. And Iran exporting terrorism not only to every part of the Middle East, but to Venezuela. By the way, what are we doing with Greenland? We got to do something with Greenland. You have to wash their brains and tell them there is a higher cause out there. It's religious, ethnic, racial, whatever. And for that higher cause, you can disregard all the normal rules of morality.
What did he say? Through deception, wage war. Tactic, have your enemies fight your enemies. Muslim, Christian, black, white, left, right. Islam, Christianity, Zionism. If a national draft ever becomes necessary, Teslas will not be usable to flee the country. Vehicles can be remotely restricted from crossing certain borders if required by law. Hopefully it never comes to that, but technology shouldn't be used to avoid civic duty. You cannot bury the Epstein files under Iran's rubble. If only this amendment passed back in 1916. All acts of war should be put to a national vote. Anyone voting yes has to register as a volunteer for service in the United States Army.
They've ruined everything. Playgrounds. I took my granddaughter to a playground. What happened to playgrounds? The slide is 5 feet high, made out of plastic. She would go 4 inches and stop, 4 inches and stop, 4 inches and stop. That's not a slide, it's a scoot. Wee papa, wee papa, wee papa, wee papa. What did we have? We had a 6-story high solid steel structure. About mid-July, mid-July would hit a temperature of about 285 degrees. You lose 2 layers of skin on the way down. Another layer when you hit the ground like a flat rock on a pond. Come back picking gravel out of your thighs. Yeah! Now it's wee papa, wee papa, wee papa. I wanted to shove her down the slide. I did. I wanted to shove her so she'd know what an exhilarating feeling of sliding. And I felt 6 iPhones on my back. Go ahead, old man. We dare you. It's nuts. Car seats, I'm not against car seats. I'm just telling you, I'm tired of strapping my granddaughter in like a NASCAR driver to drive 2 miles to get a Diet Coke from the mini mart. She's 54 pounds. I'm going to get a hernia hauling her in and out of the state. What age can you take them out now? 5, 7, 18? Here's your high school diploma. You get to ride home like a big boy today. I mean, come on. Car seat, we didn't even have seat belts. I walked the back seat of my mother's car for 4 years. She'd be driving, I'd just be walking the back seat side to side. Sure, every now and then she'd hit the brakes, I'd fly up into the front. She'd toss me back like a trout. What are you doing up here? Get back there. I got pulled over by the police. I'm not making this up. I got pulled over by the police because it was sunny day and my granddaughter was in the back seat with sunshine through the window, and the policeman said, I'm not going to write you up this time, but you need to have a sunshade to protect her from the sun. I go, what? Are you kidding? I mean, I almost got arrested. I said, you're kidding me. This is a joke, right? When did the sunshine become this evil thing? We didn't have sunscreen. You know what sunscreen was when I was a kid? Dirt. That's what it was. Dirt. And why? Because we would eat dirt and it would get all over our face and protect us from the sun. And then we'd wash it down with water from a garden hose. And then I'd take a bath, put on my asbestos pajamas and go to bed. And look how I turned out.
That's all, folks.